Good evening. Today is Thursday, March 19th, 2020. I now call this Fairfield Board of Education regular meeting to order. And Mrs. Lane, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Begley?
Here.
Mr. Birding?
Present?
Mrs. Gundrum?
Here.
Mrs. O'Neill? Here. Mrs. Shorter?
Here.
Could you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first item on the agenda is presentations and resolutions. Mr. Smith?
Thank you. Mr. Birdie, members of the board, we do have several presentations scheduled this evening. Our first presentation is the A to Z Effective School Board Recognition. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Ms. Gina Gentry Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Smith and members of the board. Excuse me, it seems like as soon as I walk up here, I lose my voice. Excuse me. Each year, the Ohio School Boards Association, Southwest Region, recognizes the steps and actions that area school boards take to meet its district goals. Called the A to Z Effective School Board Award, it honors school boards that are doing outstanding work in the Southwest Ohio region. The award is presented to school boards who meet various levels of criteria on a checklist of 26 items. The levels of achievement are gold, silver, and bronze. For about a decade, our school board has achieved gold level status, and this year we're at gold plus. That means that we've met all 26 of 26 criteria on the checklist. We are proud to recognize our school board members. You don't have to come down or touch me or anything like that. Mr. Michael Birding, Mr. Brian Begley, Mrs. Geraldine Gundrum, Mrs. Carrie O'Neill, and Mrs. Belina Shorter. We are grateful for the work you do on behalf of all of our students, staff, and the community that makes up the Fairfield City School District. So we do have a couple of things that we're going to be hanging in district office that I'll have available if you want to look at it later, a couple of plaques. And then we also have this fun little certificate for you guys.
Nice.
I don't know if they can see. Can you guys see? So thank you for the work that you do for us. We appreciate you.
Thank you very much. Any comments from the board?
It's hard not to want to hug you, so thank you. Thank you very much. That is.
Thank you for helping us with that. Okay, Mr. Smith?
All right. Our next presentation this evening is part one of a two-part installment, Building Our Future, and the first part includes a facility planning update. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Penny.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Birding, members of the board. Tonight I'll be presenting, as Mr. Smith mentioned, on the facility planning update and our 5-year maintenance plan. Mr. Thackeray couldn't make it tonight from SHP. He was going to come, but based on the COVID-19 pandemic, he's not here tonight. He did say that he was going to come, and based on limitations within who can be in rooms and things like that, and just the overall pandemic, I said that I would go ahead and handle without him. If we have any questions that I can't handle, I'll definitely talk to him about that, and then we'll move on from there. So this evening, I'd like to start with a review.
Might have to point it over this direction.
Where's the
Jeff.
computer? Okay.
It usually works better.
Okay, excellent. So last year at this time, I came to you with a 5-step plan for success in regards to building our future. This was a 5-step plan to go all the way through master planning. And at this point and this evening, we're going to focus on steps 1 and 2. Heavy focus will be placed on step 1 this evening, which is the facility assessment. This is something that we've taken pretty much a year to complete and has been done extremely thoroughly with the help of SHP as well as other contractors and our staff. We've had a boatload of staff input, and I'll be talking about that also. But to review this 5-step plan, just to get us in focus, the first step was the facility assessment. It was to establish a strong foundation for us, and that foundation is going to be used not just for what you'll see this evening, but also the future planning focus groups and so forth. Next, we have the evaluation of assessment results. As you can see, well, I must have clicked the button, I apologize. Back to slide 1, or the first slide. So we've completed the facility assessment part of it, but step 2, the evaluation of assessment results, that's where we currently stand right now. And we did anticipate, even at that point last year, that it'd be in the first half of 2020 that we would end up looking at this evaluation. Part of that is looking at the current facility maintenance plan, perceived needs, and the financial plan that would go with that. So we're right on schedule with that. Those are the 2 things that we're going to discuss. And then the final 3 steps, which we will not be going into this evening, but as part of part 2 presentation in the future, we'll be talking about the progress assessment. And that's us really looking at where we stand and if there triggers are in place for us to move forward with step 4 and 5, which would be the establish a focus group and then establish a master plan for our district moving forward. At this point, is there any questions regarding these 2 slides in our five-step plan for success?
I don't have any.
Okay. So I'll move into the facility assessment. The facility assessment was extremely exciting, and I had a lot of feedback from people saying that they enjoyed it also, primarily because it allowed us to deep dive into our facilities. It allowed for people to express how they felt about how our facilities were in regards to condition, how they were meeting our needs, but then also, future things that will improve our educational environment, that will meet the needs of the students as well as the staff. So I'll begin with talking about the building leadership. We had meetings, Mr. Thackeray and I met with all building administrators, and we talked to them about a range of things. But ultimately, what did they envision in regards to their facility needs? And what would make it the best educational environment possible? Now, on top of that, we also talked about things that they feel are hampering them in delivering that education. Strong focus was put on building envelope, mechanicals, warm, safe, and dry type of aspects that are crucial to the success that occurs within the buildings. Another part of that was before coming to these meetings with Mr. Thackeray and I, the principals talked with different stakeholders within their building. It was as in-depth, I believe, as what we would have or will have when we do the actual master planning and establishing focus groups, but they at least talk to different teachers, and then the input that they get all the time through the year. And they were able to bring this, and we collected just a volume of information from each building. Leaving each building, I would say right now I have stacks of different notes taken, and Mr. Thackeray has the same, which we will use leading into our future planning and the focus groups. Then we also worked with the custodial maintenance departments. We met with the maintenance department and we talked about the facilities overall, not just the educational facilities, but overall facilities in the state they felt like they were in. We talked about electrical, electrician, HVAC, and we took our resident experts in these different trades and we collected information from them. And then we also met with the custodians in every single building, and we had walkthroughs with them of their buildings because they know their buildings most likely better than anyone does. And it was the head custodian that we met with to do the walkthrough. And they gave us insight. And it was interesting how at times lines crossed between what the principal said and what the head custodian said. Then other times they had their own unique insights. And sometimes they were unique insights into things that crossed into each other's worlds. So it was really interesting to gather that information, invaluable. So we also met with contractors and experts. So SHP is being one of those experts. But we also have a roofing company that we work with and other experts that came in and gave us not just estimates, but also their opinions on areas that we found through meeting with building leadership and the custodial maintenance, and the things we were already aware of, to try to get, like I said, the most accurate estimates, as well as insight into the best solution for us moving forward. And then district leadership. There was discussions with district leadership about findings and future planning and how this should go forward. I'm going to move into the assessment categories. I'd like to have everyone have the opportunity to see what this looked like. There are 23 areas that were assessed through all the walkthroughs that we did in all of the facilities. So there's a list of those there. Crucial ones that we were really, really concerned about from a facility standpoint were the warm, safe, and dry ones, because those are critical to our operation. And like I said, there are also other ones discussed that would directly impact education if they were improved upon, and just opportunities for the students. Like I said, a core focus when it comes to need more than want was put on that warm, safe, and dry. And safe from a structural standpoint. We really focused in on structural in regards to that. I'm going to go ahead and dig a little deeper here into certain categories, select categories out of those assessment categories we just saw. Heating and cooling systems. So heating and cooling systems, those would be controls and mechanical equipment. Those are crucial to keeping the temperature and climate within our environment or within our buildings exactly where it needs to be. Roofing, which entailed replacement and preventive maintenance plan. So there is a 5-year preventive and replacement plan that we have established and put into place that we've been using. Electrical, so service and needs assessment, working with our electrician as well as talking to SHP and other contractors in regards to how our electrical systems are set up within our buildings. Plumbing and fixtures, we assessed fixtures, lines, and valves. Exterior walls, not just for aesthetics, but aesthetics is very important, but structural integrity and safety. And then also the overall site. That's another category that I pulled out here to take a deeper dive into. And that's curbs, or paving plan, concrete, curbs, ramps, sidewalks, and stairs. So I have a lot of data, or a lot of words on these slides. And hopefully the print's not too small. I did my best to fit it in. I didn't want to overwhelm with 20 slides. So I tried to gather everything together. But anyway, this is a further dive in, and we're going to tackle the heating and cooling systems and the things that we found, roofing, exterior walls and chimney, and site. I'd like to start with the heating and cooling systems. One thing that I'd like to point out also is our district has 1.3 million, close to, well, we'll say 1.3 million square feet of space under roof. So that's just one of those stats that it's interesting to know how much space we have, but it also says a lot about the assets that we have and how large and how vast our facilities are. For instance, the high school has 313,000 square feet. So that's a very large facility. I'm going to start with Crossroads Middle School. And one of the findings that I found that I wasn't aware of is that our control systems in Crossroads Middle School are original to the building, 1978. And when looking closer at it, I actually saw 1977 tags on them, which makes sense because they were put in before the building officially opened. That includes controls. The boiler is a 1978 boiler. And then the cooling tower is aged also. That's one of the areas that through this assessment that I thought, wow, we definitely need to address this system, and we need to do something about getting a replacement in place, just because this is one of our mission critical systems to make sure our students are warm. So at the high school, our control system here is from 1997, and also we have a chiller that needs to have a replacement also. So in multiple buildings, we also identified rooftop units that are due for replacement over the next 5 years. What we do a lot of time on rooftop units are we just replace those through in a cycle, and our HVAC experts, along with some contractor support, depending on what the task is, ends up taking care of that. But for example, before I leave the area of heating and cooling systems, an estimated cost for replacing those original control systems and replacing the boiler is around $650,000. So those costs were estimates, and we'll talk about that here on the next slide. But those cost estimates are based on many things. They include some contingency costs, and they are fairly conservative numbers. But just to put things in context, I want to throw that out there. The high school, for instance, is around $1.6 million. So that's for the control system and the chiller replacement. So those are both systems that are mission-critical systems. They're getting some age on them. The Crossroads have a huge amount of age on them, on those two, the controls as well as the boiler and the cooling towers. Not incredibly youthful either. But they're systems that there's been efficiency increases with time, and then also are all over 20 years old, some pushing much further than that. I'd like to next go to roofing. And I have a few statistics on here just to put things in context for everyone. We have very close to 900,000 square feet of roofing. So an estimated asset value, and that's if we replaced every bit of roofing with brand new roof right now at this moment. Our asset value is around $16.8 million. So that's if we replaced everything. But it kind of puts things into context about how much roofing we have. So we have a replacement as well as a preventive maintenance plan, as I've already mentioned. And with that plan, what we've done is we're going to begin every fall, which we did this past fall, doing an infrared scan on pieces of roof that we believe that we're going to bid for next year or bid out next year, whether it's a replacement based on age or based on direct need, or it's just maintenance that we're doing. We believe these infrared scans, which are not incredibly expensive, but if they're applied correctly, is going to allow us to not just have someone look at the roof and give a guesstimate on how the deck looks and how the things that can't be seen without X-ray or without that infrared scan. It'll give us an idea of what we're looking at, and then when we put it out for bid or we work with our purchasing cooperative, and that's how we've been doing it, it's worked out really, really well. We can cut costs and cut unexpected situations from coming up during that process. So that's something now that we're including in everything we do, and the plan is to do that every fall, and then when we go into the following year, we're going to be ready to go. So we have that replacement, like I said, replacement and preventive maintenance plan. Multiple buildings, sections of new roof are on the plan, as well as preventive maintenance for multiple buildings. I'm going to go ahead, well, before I move on, actually, I'm going to go ahead and discuss, for instance, or give an example, the remainder of the 400 wing at Creekside. That's an example of this upcoming year, us taking and doing a replacement on that section. But there's times I come to you and I bring up roofs and I talk about things like that. We're not always replacing, we're doing preventive maintenance also. So for instance, there will be some preventive maintenance that we'll be doing at Crossroads this upcoming year. And that's to lengthen the value and the quality of our current asset if we don't have to pour a bunch of money into a direct replacement. So I'm moving on to exterior walls and chimney as one of the assessment categories that I really want to focus on this evening. North Elementary, it's in need of exterior masonry and joint repair. Fairly extensive. And we monitor that every year with the freeze and thaws, the heat, and as it goes through, like I said, winter and freeze and thaws, to make sure that it's still safe within the specs of what we believe will be able to support the educational environment. but it is something that we're going to have to strongly consider in the future, is either the repairs that are going to be necessary on North Elementary or what we decide to do out of the focus groups in our master planning. East Elementary. One of the things we found was the gymnasium wall at East Elementary has some, there's some settling, and it needs some structural work done on it. Is it still safe? Yes, we've had it assessed, and it is still safe. But the key is to catch things early before something does happen, whether from a further deterioration that will cost us more money or a safety issue. Both of the situations that I've mentioned at this point, we do not see as a safety issue today, or we'd be addressing it today. But there are things that we have highlighted and said, we definitely need to take a look at these things, and that's what we plan on doing. High school. Our high school was built in 1997, which was our newest building up till 2017. Well, that and the East Elementary, both of them in 1997. But that's been over 20 years ago. And there's expansion joints on the exterior of the building, as well as downspouts that need a considerable amount of care, because we haven't done anything with them, and they only have a certain amount of expected life. So that is one of the things that we noticed that definitely needs to be addressed and is part of our budget plan. And then multiple buildings, any brick buildings that we have that haven't had the expansion joints for the brick, as well as some tuck point at times, are also things that we've considered within our plan, and it will be considered within the 5-year budget. So Crossroads would be a great example of that, Crossroads Middle School. Site and paving. One of the items on the agenda tonight, there's an item for discussion regarding our 2020-21 paving project, and I'll give you some light details on that and be requesting permission for us to go out for bid for us to complete our project. So one of the things we focused on in regards to site is the paving as well as concrete. This includes sidewalks in front of buildings, any type of, I guess, hard structure that could be tripped on as an eyesore, those sort of things we want to definitely address and make sure that we try to do it in a cycle so that way we can always keep everything nice for the district. Because if we do things responsibly and we kind of try to put things as best possible in a life cycle, then everything will always be nice, and we can have more predictive budgeting hopefully also. We all know that life happens though, and when life happens, things change that plan that you thought would definitely line up all the way down through your life cycle. So we want to do our best attempts at maintaining a life cycle. Other things in regards to overall site, bleacher replacements, lighting upgrades are things that we also feel are a definite need within our district. Before I move on, is there any questions about these items or anything that I've presented on so far?
Any questions?
Nope.
No?
No.
So I'm going to move on to the Facility Improvement Plan 5-year budget plan page. And then also at the same time, you should have a handout that you can put next to it if you'd like. That's the 5-year budget highlighted items. This is not a fully encompassing list of the items that come from our facility plan and the 5-year part of that, the 5-year planning, but they are focal items that I did want to bring up and be able to show everyone. So that way you can kind of look down through the list, see the things we identified, and see the things that we feel are essential needs for our district to take care of. So I'm going to go ahead and start by talking about the slide. So key considerations for this budget plan: warm, safe, and dry. Safe in regards to structural, and dry in regards to climate control, whether it's heating, cooling. And we also looked at the roofing assessment with the 5-year roofing plan we talked about, district paving plan, and essential improvements that were identified. So when you look at the actual slide in the table breakdown, I'll go from left to right on this. So we have the schools, or buildings, because there's some just overall buildings. There's also athletic facilities mentioned. And moving to the right, you have planned improvement, and you have an overall cost for that planned improvement. Now, that cost includes an inflation, or it includes initially not an inflation per year, but as you go down through from FY22 on, there's a 5% inflation. But the planned improvement includes non-construction costs, which could be engineering costs, planning, things like that, and also design contingency. All of the projects that we have on here will not need those type of services. Some will, but not all of them. But it's covered as a blanket when you do your facility planning, your master planning with SHP. They kind of blanket those in because they understand there's some contingency costs at times that come up. And we don't want to undershoot what the cost will be when we go into these projects and mislead. So moving to the right, we have FY21 and a breakdown of costs. FY22, and as I said, as the numbers go up, there is that 5% that's going to increase in each one of those columns. So starting at FY21, if you come down to where it says totals, and you move to the right, you'll see $3.2 million. So that's what our budget, at least what we'd like to have to be able to complete the projects that we feel are crucial for us to do in year one. And as you slide to the right, what you'll notice is you have the total for that column, which includes that 5% inflation for each one of those years, as well as a composite of year one and year two. Then you have the same thing over to FY23 and going down, and then you have the composite of year 1 through 3, and so forth, until you get to the bottom, and it has the total of year 1 through 5, and that's $14.7 million, based on the recommendations and the things that we saw through these in-depth facility assessments. So that's kind of our layout and our budget proposal. Now, moving to the sheet that is part of your pack tonight that says highlighted items, I have proposed 5-year budget, which aligns with what I just showed you, but then I have it compared with our current budget, or our current forecasted amount, which at this point, our forecast is 4 years in, and this plan goes out 5 years. In November 2020, that 5th year will be added. So right now we have $3.9 million, close to $4 million actually forecasted over the next 4 years. I'll focus on the 4 years because that's what the forecasted amount equates to. And then a proposed 4-year budget of $11,750,471. So there is a difference of $7,765,471 in this. But as we go down through, what we'll notice is, I'll start at FY21. FY21 has a lot of large ticket items on it that we found. For instance, Crossroads replacing that 1978 boiler, as well as the HVAC control system. That's a large chunk, a very, very large chunk. And right now we have a company actually doing an energy assessment on that building and putting projections in place and how much money that they believe will save by updating these controls, as well as just having a boiler that is from this century. So those are things to be seen. But there's other things that we noticed that are thrown in here that we see as essentials that aren't typical items. For instance, our new buildings. Our new buildings are beautiful. But what we found is we have the standing seam roof, and we actually saw, or we had a camera actually see sheets of ice sliding off of the roof this year and coming down, and we caught it on camera. That's something that we do not want. So we don't have to worry about the risk of that at this point because we aren't going to have any more ice most likely. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we put these Snow Gem roof ice guards on the roof. So there's no chance that sheets of ice sliding off the roof could land on anyone. Those are the type of things that we tried to get really detailed with this assessment and make sure that we didn't just look at the things that are right in front of our face, but also think outside the box. And also it was through the conversations that we had with people about things that they had seen in the building they were concerned about, and keeping an open mind to that. and saying, oh, you saw that, instead of trying to say, oh, well, they saw something, we'll push that to the side. We tried to gather all the input we could and then tried to process and put it together. So back to what we're talking about on this sheet, though. So another example, we've had some issues with our lights. They're aged lights at Christie Dennis Stadium. That's something that we have lights go out at time, and events have to stop. And we don't want that to occur. We want our facilities to be top-notch, and they are. They are very high-quality facilities. But that's a piece of the puzzle that we want to ensure just doesn't continue to happen. So that's another item that's on the list here. And as you go down, there's many of those, especially the first 2 years. There's many items the first 2 years, for instance, like the controls and the chiller at the high school. There's items that are large ticket items that run these dollar amounts up some. But they are things that we really need to take a serious look at and resolve. So the current forecasted amount for FY21 at I'll say $2 million does fall short of that proposed amount. But there's many things we've added on here since we actually set that forecasted amount that are extremely valid. So as I go down through and talk about FY22, you'll notice that the current forecast amount is less than that year also, but we do have the high school, we have the chiller replacement, and we have the HVAC controls, and we have some other things that are baked in there. One of the things I'll say is that when we were doing this planning, we knew, or last year's forecast, we knew that we were going to do a facility assessment, and it was going to be thoroughly done, and we were going to have experts come in and look at our facilities with us. So when it came down to forecasting, we said, well, we know we're going to have needs coming up here in the future, especially as we go down through this list year after year, but we don't know exactly what those needs are going to look like. So we didn't take and put numbers in just to put numbers in for the sake of doing so. So that's why you'll notice that the numbers drop as we go year by year by year here. So I'm going to go ahead and jump down, and we can go back to this through discussion once I finish. But I'm going to go ahead and jump down to FY23. And some of the things that are on here for FY23, 24, and 25 are items that may or may not occur. It really depends on, for instance, what our focus groups saying as we go through master planning. For instance, we had LED lights upgraded in our district a few years ago. Around the district, many of the facilities received LEDs. It was not 100% adoption of LEDs. For instance, Creekside Middle School. Creekside Middle School, one of our older facilities, did not get LEDs throughout the building because you would have had to replace all the fixtures. And it was cost prohibitive at that point, and they didn't make bulbs or a setup that fit our fixtures at that point. So since it didn't make sense as part of that project, we never upgraded them. At the same time, that's something in at least FY23 we put in here that hopefully, and we'll see what happens, but if we have some ideas on where we plan on going in the future for our facilities in our district, we may need to go ahead and upgrade those, or we may need to say, hey, we're going to go ahead and put that on hold because we have other plans. We don't know what the future holds, but we'll see what happens. There's some other things that are also on here. Turf replacement. Is that a general fund item, or is that something where we'll have the benefit of having money come in from another source? Well, it would be irresponsible, in my opinion, to not at least put on here that we need to look at turf replacement. But at the same time, that might not come directly out of the general fund. But it is accounted for in here from a fiscal standpoint. There's many items like that. One of the largest items, well, one of the larger items on this list is an FY25. And it is the replacement of the visitor bleachers and press box at Alumni Stadium. So that's an item that like I said, we didn't just look at school buildings. We took this assessment a step further, and we tried to look at all of our facilities overall, all of our assets when it came to facilities. And that's something that we believe could use a good upgrade. So there's items in here that we feel are essential for us moving forward as a district in a positive direction. But at the same time, depending on how things line up fiscally and our district's needs, may be pulled from the list, they may be pushed back on a list. Our assessment's a great foundation, but ultimately, once the assessment is completed, this becomes a living document and is fluid. So depending on needs we see or needs that arise that we can't even project because there's nothing wrong with it today, but something pops up in the future, things slide around. So it's a fluid document. So that completes my presentation tonight from at least my end. I'd like to open it up to all of you for any questions you may have, and I'll do my best to answer anything that's on the architectural engineering side. But if I don't have the answer, I'll reach out to Mr. Thackeray, and he can get the answer for you.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
Yeah, I think I do have one.
Okay.
Mr. Penny, when we're looking at the heating cooling systems, it talks about Crossroads, the original control system from 1978, and the high school's control system also needs replacement, and it's 23 years old versus 42 years old. Any reason why that system's already deficient?
Well, what I'll say as far as from industry recommendations, Crossroads Middle School system's highly antiquated.
Mhm.
Highly antiquated. But what we've had up here at the high school, we've had issues with controlling our temperature zones. A whole lot of issues with doing so. And at times, first off, it's highly inefficient. We're having a lot of issues with inefficiency. But then also we're having problems with comfort and temperature. For instance, there's times that we'll have extra moisture in areas. We need to do things with dampers and things like that. That's one of those questions. For further information, I can reach out to Mr. Thackeray and see if I can get more detailed, or when we come to our next presentation, we can talk more thoroughly about that. But that is one of the reasons why, at least in this building, we're saying that we really need to look at a new control system, because it's just not meeting the mark of what we need.
Can I ask kind of a follow-up question to that? If these new systems are more efficient, will that save in energy costs?
It definitely should. And what we're looking at, like I said, at Crossroads, is actually having a company do that assessment for us. So we'll be able to see what we're really looking at dollars and cents wise. But the fiscal responsibility is key, but also the comfort of the people that are in the buildings is another huge factor and key, because ultimately the buildings aren't here just for the purpose of being buildings and just standing. They're here to serve, and to serve the needs of the people who are in them so they can focus on what they need to carry out, which is excellent education and succeeding with the opportunities they have. So,
Any other questions? Mr. Smith, could you elaborate a little bit more on this list? Do you see there's more needs? Are there more nice-to-haves? And then also, Mrs. Lane, while you're listening to Mr. Smith's answer, maybe you can prepare us for how you see this affecting our budget and finances.
Yeah, so we have, prior to the COVID-19 situation, Nancy and Joe and I had spent hours going through this list, having hours of conversation about what is essential. We want to be good stewards of our facilities, and we want to take care of them. But this was very difficult to see. It definitely got our attention. And so one of the goals that we talked about as we had those numerous conversations, because there are some other items that are out there in terms of those were more of the wants from staff members, and these, what you see here on the highlighted items document, those are more needs.
Okay.
But we are going to continue to have more conversation. Probably, we did have a lot, but we probably would have had even more, and we'll continue to have more conversations about this list because of the financial impact on the district. And then, as I mentioned, also, there is a part two to this presentation as well. But I thought it was important to go ahead and have this discussion in public, just to be transparent and to get these needs out front, and also give the board some time just to think through this list, because again, we will be coming back and having more conversation. So I hope that's helpful.
It does. And before I get to Mrs. Lane, Mr. Penny, I'm trying to balance both these sheets here. The items for the schools and the planned improvement dollars that you have listed here, does any of on the buildings themselves, include the paving, or is that under district-wide?
It's under district-wide.
So these numbers for East Elementary gymnasium wall, it's the only thing I see listed for East Elementary in year 21. And you have it down as $58,000. That's just to repair the wall, right?
That's an actual contractor estimate we have received.
Okay. And then there's another one, and I apologize. In South Elementary, it's $404,000 for just those two items. Am I looking at that right?
Here are we looking at here?
It would be 157, I think.
I'm sorry,
for us to-
157. Okay, I was bundling all this together. Thank you. And then Crossroads, the boiler, the HVAC, and then the roof, you're looking at almost $1 million for those three items, correct?
Yes, without bidding. That's just based on
Right.
estimates from SHP.
Right. And then the gym ice guards, are they just over areas that are over walkways, or is that across the whole roof?
When SHP looked at it, they looked at the overall roof.
Okay.
But ultimately, they will be put in areas that make sense for protecting the people down below.
So it's not along all the roof lines, it's just going to be, to your understanding, it's just going to be over where people, walkways and entryways and,
That number is based on the overall roof,
okay?
but we will end up installing we'll have them installed based on the areas that make sense regarding that.
Okay. And then, I don't know if this is the will of the board, so, but I would love to see this paper with the dollar figures next to it. 'Cause for me, it's hard to keep going back and forth. Is that okay with
Yeah,
everybody?
yeah.
Could you get that to us that way?
I can.
Okay. That'd be so much
Handwritten
easier for me. I'm
copy.
kind of a nerdy kind of guy that way. And then, I don't know if there's a way to prioritize this list, like, because if we come down to, we've only got so much money to spend, what are the priorities? And what can be pushed further? I mean, I hate to keep pushing things further down the road, but if we don't have the money for it, what are the priorities? Because obviously, we're not up on the roof, and we're not in the chillers, and we don't have that information. If that would be possible to get a priority list per year.
That can definitely be done. The key is going to be, the first few years is trying to, on some of these items, like the boiler and so forth, boiler and controls, at, for instance, Crossroads, those are large ticket items that weren't figured in. But as time goes on, like I said, typically, I'll say off the cuff, I believe that we usually budget between $1.5, $2 million a year, approximately. When you start pulling out FY23, FY24, and FY25, and some of those large items that are truly needs, but aren't part of that run, that typical run, like the bleachers press box, the turf replacement, and things like that, you really start looking at what would be a reasonably consistent budget that would be required. So, but yes, I can do what you're asking.
And then one more thing, and I hate to keep asking you for things, but, so we have budgeted $1.994 million for this coming year. Are any of these items on the list part of that budget? And if so, could you indicate which ones were budgeted for? If that makes any sense.
yes, I can do that. And I believe we're going to find there's a good percentage that were, but there's just things that we found through this assessment.
Right, there might be things on here and said, well, we budgeted this much for this item, but now it's going to be this much more, that one item. But at least we would know that this much was budgeted for this item, but now it's going to be this. So some of them maybe zero was budgeted, and now it's $660,000, but that would be helpful for me.
Okay.
But thank you so much for doing all this work. I mean, this is quite extensive, and it's a little bit of a sticker shock, obviously. I don't blame you for that. It is what it is. I mean, but I'm glad that we're seeing the things that we need to do and not finding out later that we should have done things. So thank you. Are you just looking for, this is going to be part one of part two, so you're not looking for anything tonight? Okay.
No, not this time.
Okay. Does anybody else, Brian or Jerry, have anything more for Mr. Penny?
No, just appreciate his efforts.
I don't have anything. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.